18 people sat there, silent. My boss smiled, announcing it like a victory. But none of them knew that the person just fired in front of them, me, was the only one who held the master admin codes to the entire $67 million system they'd just signed for. And I've never believed in forgiveness. My name is Madeline Pierce, but everyone at ClearForge Strategies called me Maddie. At 38, I'd built a reputation in Denver's digital marketing scene as the woman who could salvage any client relationship, no matter how damaged. 7 years at this company, and I'd become the invisible foundation holding up most of our major accounts. The Denver skyline stretched outside my corner office window, a view I'd earned through countless late nights and crisis management miracles. ClearForge occupied 3 floors of a gleaming downtown tower, all glass and steel ambition. We managed digital strategies for Fortune 500 companies, turning their clunky corporate messages into sleek campaigns that actually moved needles. I'd started as a senior strategist, but my real value emerged when I began developing proprietary analytics systems. Not because it was in my job description, it wasn't. I did it because I saw gaps in how we understood consumer behavior, patterns that traditional tools missed. Every evening after official hours ended, I'd stay behind, teaching myself advanced data modeling, building algorithms that could predict campaign performance with uncanny accuracy. The Harrington & Kane account was my masterpiece. What started as a modest $5 million contract had grown into a $67 million behemoth, largely because of the behavioral prediction models I'd created. Their CMO, Patricia Harrington herself, had once called me the secret weapon we didn't know we needed. But 3 months ago, everything shifted. The board brought in Scott Leyland as our new CEO, a supposed visionary from Silicon Valley, with a mandate to modernize our approach. Scott was 45, with that particular brand of confidence that comes from failing upward through enough startups to land a golden parachute. From day one, Scott made it clear he wanted fresh perspectives and new blood. Translation, he wanted to install his own people in key positions. I watched as longtime colleagues were suddenly found lacking in innovative thinking or misaligned with our evolving culture. The changes started small. I'd arrive at meetings to find someone new presenting my strategies. Documents I'd created would circulate with other people's names attached. When I raised concerns, Scott would smile that practiced smile and talk about collaborative ownership and breaking down silos. I knew what was happening. I'd seen this playbook before, but I was naive enough to think my track record would protect me. After all, I wasn't just another strategist. I was the architect of our most lucrative client relationships. The Harrington & Kane account alone generated more revenue than our next 3 biggest clients combined. 2 weeks ago, the final sign appeared. An email invitation for a strategic alignment session with the full Harrington & Kane leadership team. 18 executives would fly in from Chicago for a comprehensive review of our partnership. The meeting was scheduled for 2 p.m. on a Thursday, in our main conference room. The peculiar part, I wasn't listed as a presenter, my own account, my own strategies, and I was relegated to optional attendee. When I questioned this with Scott's assistant, she mumbled something about evolving team structures and hurried away. That night, I stayed late again, but not to work on campaigns. I methodically documented every system I'd built, every custom algorithm, every piece of intellectual property I developed on my own time, with my own resources. 7 years of innovation, coded and created outside of ClearForge's infrastructure, on my personal laptop, using software licenses I'd paid for myself. Most people don't realize that when you build something yourself, on your own time, with your own tools, it belongs to you, not your employer, not unless you explicitly sign those rights away. And I'd been very, very careful about what I'd signed. As I backed up the final files, I looked around my office, the awards on the walls, the client gifts, the photos from successful campaign launches. I'd given this place everything, but somewhere in the back of my mind, a small voice whispered what I'd been too proud to admit: they were already planning my execution. I just didn't know they'd do it in front of an audience. Thursday arrived with the kind of crisp Denver morning that usually energized me. I dressed carefully, my best navy suit, the one that made me feel invincible. I arrived at the office at 8:30 a.m., giving myself plenty of time to review the presentation materials one final time. The conference room was already being prepared, Catering staff arranged pastries and coffee on the sideboard. It checked the projection system. Everything looked normal, professional, perfect, too perfect. At 1:45 p.m., I made my way to the conference room. Several colleagues passed me in the hallway, offering quick smiles that didn't quite reach their eyes. Did they know? Had word already spread through the office grapevine? The Harrington and Kane executives arrived in a cluster, their Chicago energy filling the room with expensive cologne and confident handshakes. Patricia Harrington caught my eye and nodded. We'd built solid rapport over the years. Her CFO, Marcus Webb, even asked about my recent vacation to Seattle. Scott entered last, at precisely 2 p.m., wearing his signature black turtleneck and blazer combination. He moved to the head of the table with practiced authority, waiting for everyone to settle. "Welcome, everyone," he began, his voice carrying that Silicon Valley smoothness. "We're thrilled to have the entire Harrington and Kane leadership team here today. This partnership represents everything ClearForge stands for: innovation, results, and transformation." I sat 3 chairs down from him, my laptop open, ready to jump in when called upon. But the call never came. Instead, Scott launched into a presentation I'd never seen before. Slides filled with buzzwords and vague promises, stripped of all the detailed analytics that made our campaigns actually work, 40 minutes in. Patricia Harrington's expression had shifted from engaged to concerned. Then it happened. "Before we continue," Scott said, his smile widening, "I need to address an organizational change that affects this account." My fingers stilled on my keyboard. The room's energy shifted, that subtle tension when everyone senses something significant approaching. As we evolve our strategic capabilities, we sometimes need to make difficult decisions about team composition. He turned to look directly at me. "Madeline Pierce has been a valued member of our team, but we've determined that her approach no longer aligns with ClearForge's creative direction moving forward." The words hung in the air like smoke from a fired gun. 18 pairs of eyes turned to me. "Effective immediately," Scott continued, his tone conversational, as if discussing the weather. "Madeline's employment with ClearForge is terminated. Security will assist her in collecting her belongings after this meeting concludes." Patricia Harrington's coffee cup rattled against its saucer. "Excuse me," her voice cut through the shock. "You're firing the person who built our entire campaign infrastructure in the middle of our strategy meeting." Scott's smile never wavered. "We have a fantastic transition team ready to ensure continuity. Brad Martinez here." He gestured to a young man I'd seen around the office for maybe 2 weeks. "We'll be taking over as your primary strategic contact." I should have screamed, should have thrown my laptop, should have done something dramatic and satisfying. Instead, I closed my computer with deliberate calm, gathered my notepad and pen, and stood. "Maddie," Patricia started, but I held up my hand. "It's fine," I said, my voice steady despite the hurricane in my chest. I looked around the table, making eye contact with each executive who'd trusted me with their brand. "Good luck with your transition." Security appeared at the door, 2 guards I'd chatted with every morning for 7 years. The shame in their eyes told me they hated this as much as I did. One of them, Jerome, actually whispered, "I'm sorry," as they escorted me out. The walk to my office felt endless. Colleagues pretended to be absorbed in their screens, avoiding eye contact. News travels fast in an office. By the time we reached my door, everyone knew. They gave me 1 box and 15 minutes. I took only personal items: photos, my coffee mug, a small cactus Patricia had given me after our first successful campaign. My computer access was already revoked. Email, gone. Internal systems, locked. As Jerome walked me to the elevator, he muttered, "This ain't right. Ms. Pierce, you're the reason half these accounts exist." I patted his arm. "Thanks. Jerome, take care of yourself." The elevator descended in silence. 38 floors of humiliation. 1 ding at a time. When the doors opened to the lobby, I walked out with my head high, my single box balanced against my hip. It wasn't until I reached my car in the parking garage that I finally stopped moving. I sat behind the wheel for an hour, maybe more, staring at nothing, not crying. I was too angry for tears. Instead, I replayed every detail, every word, every smirk on Scott's face. He thought he'd won. thought he'd eliminated an obstacle to placing his own people. People who would funnel contracts to his former associates. People who would play his games. But Scott had made one critical error. He'd assumed that firing me would separate me from my work. He didn't understand that the real infrastructure of that $67 million account wasn't in ClearForge's servers. It was in mine. Back in my apartment, I poured myself a glass of wine and opened my personal laptop. The familiar startup chime felt like a battle cry. 7 years of work spread across my screen, folders meticulously organized, each containing pieces of the empire I'd built outside ClearForge's walls. People assume that when you work for a company, everything you create belongs to them. But I'd learned early in my career to protect myself. Every algorithm, every behavioral model, every predictive analytics framework, I'd develop them on my own time, using my own purchased software licenses, on my personal hardware. The employment contract I'd signed with ClearForge was standard. It claimed ownership of work created during business hours using company resources. But my real work, the revolutionary stuff that made campaigns sing, that happened between 9 p.m. and 2 a.m. in my home office, fueled by coffee and curiosity. I pulled up the Harrington and Kane folder. Inside lay the crown jewel, a behavioral prediction model I called PRISM. It analyzed consumer digital footprints across 17 different parameters, creating psychographic profiles so accurate they could predict purchase decisions with 87% accuracy. ClearForge's team had access to the outputs, the reports and recommendations, but the actual engine, the code that made it run, that lived only here. My phone buzzed. A text from Patricia Harrington. "What the hell just happened? Call me." I ignored it. Then came another, from Marcus Webb. "That was insane. Do we need to be concerned about campaign continuity?" More messages flooded in from the Harrington and Kane team. Word was already spreading through their organization. A $67 million investment suddenly looked shaky. I opened Prism's core files, reviewing the intricate code I'd written. Without regular calibration, without someone who understood its nuances, the system would start producing flawed outputs within 2 weeks. Garbage in, garbage out. Except Scott's team wouldn't even know they were feeding it garbage. The irony was delicious. Scott thought he'd eliminated a costly senior employee, replacing me with cheaper talent. But he'd actually just inherited a ticking time bomb. Every campaign they ran would be based on increasingly inaccurate data. Every strategic decision would compound the errors. I could have been vindictive, could have immediately destroyed everything, left them with nothing, but that would be traceable, actionable, legally problematic. No, I had something better in mind. My laptop screen illuminated my face in the darkening room as I drafted a simple document, Notification of Intellectual Property Ownership, in clear legal language. It stated that all proprietary systems developed outside of ClearForge's time and resources remained my sole property. Any continued use would require proper licensing agreements. But I didn't send it, not yet. Instead, I opened a new browser window and did something I'd been putting off for years. I updated my LinkedIn profile, changed my status to independent consultant, added a simple description, specialized in behavioral analytics and predictive modeling for enterprise marketing campaigns. Within an hour, my inbox started filling. Former colleagues, competitors, people who'd tried to poach me before. News of my firing was spreading through Denver's marketing community like wildfire. One message caught my attention. Elaine Ward, Chief Legal Officer at North Star Consultants. Heard about ClearForge, their loss, coffee tomorrow. Elaine and I had history. We'd worked together at my first agency, stayed friends as our careers diverged. She'd built North Star into a boutique consultancy that specialized in solving problems bigger agencies couldn't touch. More importantly, she understood intellectual property law better than anyone I knew. I responded, "Absolutely, I have a story you'll want to hear." That night, I didn't sleep. Instead, I documented everything, every file, every timestamp, every proof that Prism and its related systems were mine. I created a detailed timeline showing development outside of ClearForge hours. I compiled receipts for software licenses, hosting services, even the advanced programming courses I'd taken to build these systems. By sunrise, I had a bulletproof case, but I still wasn't ready to pull the trigger. First, I wanted to see what Scott would do. How long before they realized their presentations were just pretty slides without the engine behind them? How long before Brad Martinez discovered he couldn't actually run the campaigns he'd inherited? My phone rang at 7:15 a.m. Unknown number, but I recognized ClearForge's main line. I let it go to voicemail. Then another call, and another. By 8 a.m., I had 12 missed calls and a text from a number I didn't recognize. Ms. Pierce, this is Brad Martinez. I need to discuss some technical aspects of the H&K account. Please call urgently. I smiled, sipping my coffee as the sun painted Denver's skyline gold. They'd discovered the first layer of the problem. Brad had probably tried to run a routine analysis and found nothing. Empty dashboards, error messages, systems requesting authentication he didn't have. Because while ClearForge owned the reports I generated during business hours, they didn't own the machine that created them. And without me, that machine was about to grind to a very expensive halt. My laptop chimed with a new email, Patricia Harrington, sent directly to my personal address. Maddie, I don't know what's happening at ClearForge, but my team is reporting serious concerns about campaign capability. Can we talk? The second domino was starting to fall, but I still had more pieces to move before I made my play. I closed the email without responding and got dressed for coffee with Elaine. It was time to stop being the victim of this story. The coffee shop on 17th Street was neutral territory, far enough from ClearForge's orbit that we wouldn't run into anyone from the industry. Elaine was already there when I arrived, her silver hair catching the morning light. Legal pad at the ready. You look remarkably calm for someone who just got publicly executed, she said, pushing a latte toward me. I've had time to process, I replied, settling into the worn leather chair. And plan. Elaine leaned forward, her lawyer instincts engaged. Tell me everything. I walked her through it all. The years of building Prism, the careful documentation, the after-hours development. I showed her timestamps, receipts, proof that every critical component was built on my own time with my own resources. The employment contract, she asked. Standard work for hire for anything created during business hours using company resources, but Prism was never that. I was careful. Elaine, paranoid, maybe, but careful. She reviewed my documentation on her tablet, occasionally making notes. After 20 minutes, she looked up with a shark smile. This is bulletproof, but what's your play? You could demand licensing fees, sue for misappropriation. I have something better in mind, I said. What if North Star discovered a critical vulnerability in ClearForge's analytics methodology, a flaw that could cause catastrophic misreading of consumer data? Elaine's eyes widened. That would be a legitimate business concern. We'd have an obligation to inform affected parties. Exactly. And if that vulnerability happened to exist because they're using systems they don't understand and can't properly operate, then we'd be providing a valuable service by alerting their clients to potential risks. Elaine was already seeing the angles, especially a client investing $67 million based on that data. We spent the next 2 hours crafting the approach. North Star would conduct an independent analysis of market risks in behavioral analytics. During this analysis, they would discover that certain methodologies, coincidentally matching Prism's exact specifications, contained critical vulnerabilities when operated without proper expertise. We'll need concrete examples, Elaine said. Specific scenarios where the data could be misinterpreted. I pulled up my laptop. I can give you 12 scenarios where improper calibration would lead to targeting the wrong demographic entirely. Imagine Harrington and Kane launching a youth-focused campaign that accidentally targets retirees because someone input the parameters backwards. That would be catastrophic for their brand. And entirely possible if Brad Martinez is just clicking buttons without understanding the underlying logic. Elaine scheduled a meeting with her team for that afternoon. We'll frame this as a white paper on industry risks, completely above board. No mention of ClearForge specifically, but we'll make sure Harrington and Kane receives an advance copy, given their significant investment in data-driven campaigns. My phone buzzed constantly throughout our meeting. More calls from ClearForge, texts from former colleagues, increasingly frantic messages from Brad Martinez. I ignored them all. As we prepared to leave, Elaine asked, what if Scott tries to claim you sabotaged the systems? With what evidence I haven't accessed anything since they revoked my credentials? The systems are failing because they don't know how to run them, not because I did anything to them. And if they offer to bring you back? I laughed, surprising myself with its bitterness. They publicly humiliated me in front of my biggest client. There's no coming back from that. That afternoon, while Elaine's team prepared the white paper, I took a call from Patricia Harrington. Her voice was carefully controlled, but I could hear the concern underneath. Maddie, I'll be direct. My team ran test campaigns this morning using ClearForge's systems. The results were troubling. Demographic targeting was off by 30%. The behavioral predictions made no sense. What's happening? I honestly don't know, I said truthfully. I haven't had access to any systems since yesterday afternoon. But you built these systems. I built analytical frameworks and methodologies. How they're being implemented now is beyond my knowledge or control. Patricia was quiet for a moment. My board is asking hard questions about our investment. Can you help us understand the risks? I can't discuss ClearForge's operations, but I can tell you that North Star Consultants is about to release a white paper on vulnerabilities in behavioral analytics systems. You might find it relevant. North Star Elaine Ward's firm. The very same. Another pause. Are you available for independent consulting? I'm exploring opportunities. We may need an audit of our entire digital infrastructure, independent of ClearForge. Would you be interested? I smiled at my reflection in the coffee shop window. Have your legal team contact Elaine. We can discuss terms. By 5 p.m., Elaine had sent me a draft of the white paper. It was masterful. No direct accusations, no mention of specific companies, just a thorough analysis of how behavioral analytics systems could fail catastrophically when operated without proper expertise. Case studies, hypothetical. Of course, showed multi-million-dollar campaigns targeting wrong demographics, brands alienating core customers, entire marketing strategies built on faulty data interpretation. The conclusion was stark companies relying on complex analytical systems needed to ensure continuity of expertise or face potentially devastating consequences. We'll release this Monday, Elaine said over the phone, but Patricia Harrington will receive an advance copy tomorrow morning, for her eyes only, as a concerned industry partner. And if ClearForge tries to prevent its release, on what grounds we're a consultancy sharing our expert opinion on industry best practices? Nothing defamatory, nothing that mentions them specifically, just helpful guidance for companies wanting to protect their investments. That night, I finally turned off my phone. The frantic calling had reached a crescendo. Even Scott himself had tried twice, but I was done being reactive. The pieces were in motion. ClearForge was about to learn that when you fire someone in front of their biggest client, you better make sure they don't hold the keys to the kingdom. And I still had every key, perfectly legal, completely mine. The game was just beginning. Friday morning arrived with drama. At 8 a.m. sharp, Patricia Harrington received North Star's white paper via secure email. By 8:30, she'd forwarded it to her entire board. By 9, emergency meetings were being called in Chicago. I knew all this because Patricia kept me informed via text. This white paper describes our exact situation. The board is asking if ClearForge's systems match these vulnerability patterns. I was sitting in Elaine's office when the first domino fell. Her assistant knocked Harrington and Kane's legal team on line 1. Elaine put them on speaker. Ms. Ward, we've reviewed your white paper. We need to verify whether our current vendor's systems exhibit these vulnerabilities. Can North Star conduct an immediate audit? We'd be happy to help. When would you like to begin? Today, we're suspending all campaign activity until we understand our exposure. After the call, Elaine grinned. $67 million in suspended campaigns. Scott must be having quite a morning. She was right. By noon, the marketing world was buzzing. When a company like Harrington and Kane suddenly halts all digital campaigns, people notice. Adweek's newsletter included a brief item. Sources report Fortune 500 giant Harrington and Kane has paused major digital initiatives pending system review. My phone, which I'd finally turned back on, exploded with notifications. I ignored most but answered one, from Jerome, the security guard. Ms. Pierce, thought you should know it's chaos here. Emergency meetings all morning. Scott's been screaming at it. The text made me smile, But I stayed focused. Elaine's team was preparing for the audit, and I was providing technical guidance, carefully framed as general industry knowledge. Nothing specific to ClearForge. Then, at 2:15 p.m., Scott tried a new approach, an email to my personal account. Madeline, there seems to be some confusion about system access and documentation. I'm sure we can resolve this professionally. Please call me directly, Scott. I forwarded it to Elaine. Document everything, she advised. Don't respond. By 3 p.m., North Star's audit team was on site at Harrington & Kane's Chicago headquarters. They sent preliminary findings within 2 hours. The campaign systems showed all the vulnerability markers identified in the white paper. Demographic targeting algorithms were miscalibrated. Behavioral prediction models were degrading. ROI forecasts were essentially random numbers. Patricia called me directly. The audit is devastating. We're looking at potential losses in the millions if we'd continued with these campaigns. My board wants answers. I'm sorry you're dealing with this, I said carefully. Cut the diplomacy, Maddie. These are your systems. ClearForge is using your work without you. That's the real issue, isn't it? I stayed silent. My legal team has a question, she continued. If these systems were developed independently, outside of ClearForge, then who actually owns them? That would be a legal matter beyond my expertise. But you would know if you developed them on your own time, with your own resources. Again, silence. Patricia sighed. We're terminating our contract with ClearForge, effective immediately. $67 million is too much to risk on systems they clearly can't operate. But Maddie, we still need these campaigns. We need someone who understands the technology. North Star has excellent capabilities. We want you, through North Star, as a consultant. However you want to structure it, name your terms. I looked at Elaine, who was listening on mute. She nodded emphatically. Have your legal team contact Elaine Ward. We'll discuss possibilities. After the call, Elaine pulled up a draft consulting agreement she'd been preparing. Standard terms, except for one thing. You retain all IP rights to your systems. Any work you do for them leverages your existing technology under license. What kind of numbers are we talking about? For a $67 million campaign, I'd say 15% for strategic consulting and technology licensing. That's just over $10 million annually. The number made me dizzy. $10 million for work I'd been doing for a corporate salary. At 4:45 p.m., everything accelerated. A press release hit the wire. Harrington & Kane terminates relationship with ClearForge Strategies, Sites, Strategic Realignment. My phone rang immediately. Scott? This time, I answered. Maddie. His voice had lost all its Silicon Valley smoothness. What have you done? I've done nothing. Scott, I was fired yesterday. Remember, publicly, in front of 18 clients. You sabotaged the systems. I haven't touched any ClearForge systems since you revoked my access. If they're not functioning properly, perhaps you should ask Brad Martinez. You know he can't run them without... He caught himself. Without what, Scott? Silence. Without the proprietary knowledge that walks out the door when you fire someone, without understanding how the systems actually work. You made a business decision yesterday. These are the consequences. We'll sue you for sabotage. With what evidence? Check your logs. I haven't accessed anything. Your systems are failing because your team doesn't know how to operate them. That's not sabotage. That's incompetence. The board will never accept this. Do you know what losing Harrington & Kane means? I know exactly what it means. It means you lose 30% of ClearForge's revenue. It means your board starts asking why you fired the person managing your biggest account. It means maybe you should have thought before humiliating someone in front of their clients. His breathing was audible through the phone. What do you want? Nothing from you. I've already gotten what I needed. My freedom and my work. Good luck explaining this to your board. Scott? I hung up. Elaine was drafting a press release of our own. North Star Consultants announces strategic partnership with digital analytics expert Madeline Pierce. By 6 p.m., contracts were being finalized. Harrington & Kane wanted to move fast. Before their competitors realized their campaigns were vulnerable, they agreed to all terms, including the IP licensing. As I signed the consulting agreement, Patricia sent one final text. Welcome back to the team, Maddie, this time, on your own terms. The Austin sun was setting over Denver, painting the sky in shades of victory. Somewhere across town, Scott was probably in another emergency meeting, trying to explain how he'd lost their biggest client in less than 48 hours. But I wasn't thinking about him anymore. I was thinking about the future, my company, my terms, my systems. ClearForge had tried to erase me. Instead, they'd set me free. The weekend passed in a blur of contracts and setup. By Monday morning, the business world had taken notice. Adweek ran a feature, ClearForge loses $67 account after firing key executive. The article was careful, factual, but the implications were clear. Then came the anonymous Medium post. I was having breakfast when Elaine called. "Have you seen this?" She sent me the link. The title made me nearly choke on my coffee. How one woman fired in front of 18 clients saved a $67 million campaign from disaster. The post was detailed, insider-specific, written by someone calling themselves Denver Digital Observer. It laid out the entire saga, the public firing, the failing systems, the audit revealing critical vulnerabilities, and the last-minute save by bringing in the original creator as an independent consultant. "Did you write this?" Elaine asked. "No, I've been too busy setting up infrastructure to write tell-all posts." "Then who?" I had my suspicions, the writing style, the specific details about office culture, the righteous anger underneath the professional tone. It reminded me of someone, but I kept that thought to myself. Within hours, the post went viral in marketing circles. LinkedIn was flooded with discussions about employee retention, intellectual property, and the dangers of efficiency layoffs. ClearForge's social media team must have been in crisis mode. Their company page was suspiciously quiet while the internet roasted them. By Tuesday, the pressure had reached ClearForge's board. A contact at Reuters forwarded me a news alert. ClearForge Strategies CEO Scott Leyland steps down after client exodus. The accompanying article was brief but damning. Following the loss of Harrington and Kane, 2 other major clients had requested contract reviews. Stock analysts were downgrading ClearForge's outlook. The board had acted swiftly to restore confidence. I felt no satisfaction reading about Scott's downfall. If anything, I felt empty. This wasn't about him anymore. It was about building something better. Wednesday brought more developments. ClearForge announced an interim CEO, someone from their board with a reputation for stability. More interesting was the email I received that afternoon from their chief legal officer. "Ms. Pierce, the new leadership at ClearForge recognizes that errors were made in your departure. We would like to discuss a potential return to the company in an elevated role with full creative control and competitive compensation. Please contact me at your earliest convenience." I forwarded it to Elaine with a single comment, "Hell no." But they weren't done. Thursday morning, the interim CEO called personally, Margaret Chen, a board member I'd actually respected during my time there. "Maddie, I won't insult you with pleasantries. What happened last week was inexcusable. Scott's vision was wrong for ClearForge, and the board sees that now." "I appreciate you saying that, Margaret. I'm prepared to offer you Chief Innovation Officer, reporting directly to me, full autonomy over digital strategy, equity package, name your salary." "Margaret, they fired me in front of 18 clients. They tried to steal my work. I know, and I'm sorry, but you built something incredible here. Don't you want to see it through?" I thought about her words for a moment. The old Maddie might have been tempted. The safety of corporate life, the resources, the familiar environment. "No," I said simply. "I don't belong there anymore. I work better when I'm not being silenced." She sighed. "I had to try. For what it's worth, the board deeply regrets how this was handled." Regret doesn't undo humiliation. No, it doesn't. Good luck, Maddie. You'll do incredible things. After the call, I sat in my new office, a small but bright space in North Star's building. My own company logo was being designed. 3 more Fortune 500 companies had reached out about potential partnerships. My calendar was full of opportunities I'd never imagined. Patricia called that afternoon with an update. "The new campaigns are testing beautifully. Clean data, accurate targeting, ROI projections that actually make sense. The board is thrilled." Just doing my job. Your job that you now own completely. How does that feel? I looked out my window at the Denver skyline, the same view I'd had at Clear Forge, but from a different angle. Like freedom. That evening, I got one final message that made everything worthwhile. It was from Jerome, the security guard. Ms. Pierce, wanted you to know, morale here is lowest I've ever seen, but your story is giving people hope, showing them